Bit of background on myself. I grew up in a beekeeping family at Inglewood on a farm. My father was a commercial beekeeper, my uncles were commercial beekeepers. I bummed around doing a few things and then took off and joined the army for quite a long period of time, and then come back and lo and behold took up where I left off when I left, as we sometimes do. So that's sort of where I fit into the picture, how I became involved in beekeeping. I currently work as a beekeeper and have worked as a beekeeper in a commercial apiary for the last 8 or 9 years. So I've sort of seen a fair bit of it and been around quite a bit. So what I want to talk about today is take you on a bit of a journey. So we'll talk about the rhythm of the apiary based on the commercial apiary, but it's actually based on seasons and it's based on the activities that we will do in the various seasons and the lead up for the next season. Once we finish that, I want to touch just a little bit about varroa. I'm not going to do too much about varroa because I think there's plenty of experts out there that are much wiser than I am on the varroa space. But we'll talk a little bit about operational planning for varroa, so what you can do to make a plan going ahead for varroa and what inputs you can use to assist you doing that. So we'll talk about that at the end, and we'll just give you a feel for what resources you can use to make your own plan for varroa. So here we go. That's me. The presentation will follow the patterns season by season and month by month in a large commercial apiary. Unlike most hobby or sideline apiaries, the commercial apiaries are migratory and travel huge distances. We move right across Victoria and bottom end of New South Wales chasing honey flows, so a little bit different to what most people here would be. We run about 1,800 hives, or the apiary where I work, and a shout out to Jeff and Gareth, who are the bosses. Run about 1,800 hives, and there's 7 of us that work those 1,800 hives, so we've got a fair bit on our plate. It requires a well-developed knowledge of bees, climate patterns, flora and fauna to get the best advantage. So one of the key areas, I suppose, that we become involved in is knowing, understanding and forecasting what's going on with the weather, with the flora, fauna, and just the honey flows in general. Again, like you, even if you've got 2 hives, we're not much different in as far as all our tasks are driven by the environment. So it's driven by the weather, by what the flow is doing, and what the bees are doing. Our reactions then based on that. The practice has changed recently with mites, and we spend a lot more time now mite washing, going through the bottom boxes, going through the hives and reading the bees. So reading the bees now is going to become crucial, not just for us in a commercial environment, but for you as well. So being able to read your bees, understand your bees, and understand what the behaviour and patterns of the bees are is going to become crucial. Yeah, like I said, a bit of a history lesson. When I grew up with bees, that was our extracting house. Mobile extractor, the extracting, uncapping, the whole lot was done in that mobile caravan. And that was moved around, followed the bees around. So we moved the bees to a site and then we trundled along with the extractor to extract. My first journey into beekeeping was about 5 years old when my dad gave me a hive of bees and said, "That's your 5th birthday present. Get to it, boy." So that was him. He was a bit fanatic about his bees. Okay, so this has changed. Just recently, there's a new biosecurity code of practice has been released, and the new biosecurity code now sets a limit on 20 hives. So 20 hives is a marker. Everyone that owns hives now has to be registered. And over 20 hives, there are further conditions that you need to meet that are mandatory. So if you haven't already seen it, I suggest you have a look at it. It's on the it's on the website. So just look for the Biosecurity Manual 2024. But there's a lot of things that you have to adhere to now that previously you didn't have to adhere to, and that includes even if you only got 2 hives. Righto. June's the start of the winter season. The hives have been packed down into singles or doubles around Anzac Day. So Anzac Day, and this is where it comes into your operational planning or planning for your apiary. Pick key dates and line key dates up. So Anzac Day for the winter season is a key indicator. The hives are packed down into singles or doubles around Anzac Day. The nest is preparing for the oncoming cold weather and starts to clump together in the centre of the brood box. The queen's slowing down her egg laying and the cluster is occupying less and less space on the frames. So if you've been into your hives and seen the bottom box, you would see they form like a football. So they start to form like a football in the centre. From here on in, hive inspections will only be conducted by lifting the lid and eyeballing the cluster down through the frames without disturbing them. So once that cluster starts to form, once the weather changes, starts getting cold, that's the signal for you to stay out of the brood box. So the way the bees will work then is that they will then circle in that cluster and they will regulate the temperature in the brood box. So if you do have to do anything, just pick the lid up and have a quick look in the lid. Don't actually pull the bottom box to bits after that. Varroa treatments for the natural brood break and overwintering should now be completed. So it's by that time you need to have done all your Varroa treatment. Beekeepers normally start to take holidays and begin the make and mend of equipment in preparation for the new season. This is a bee site at Nye West. It's an abandoned farmhouse and that was a crisp wintry night. So the shortest day of the year, the bees have been packed down, egg production starts to slow, and this is when we talk about Varroa, the brood break. This is the start of that brood break that we're talking about. The management practices, any management practice that risks damage to the queen or risks the survival of the queen should be avoided. So hence we don't start pulling the bottom brood box to bits. So into July, mid-season or mid-July the new season begins. So that's the trigger for the next season. The days are getting longer and the queen begins laying again. Beekeepers start conducting recce's and looking at bud and crops, etc. for the coming season. So at this point we're now starting to get out, we're starting to look around, we're starting to look at the bud and starting to read the trees and the bud, how many bud it's got, whether it's got just a single year's bud or some of the trees will bud for 2 years in advance. So you start getting around looking at the bud. Weight checks involve lifting the bottom or the back of the box. All you do is we'll pass lift or heft as we call it, heft the box and check the weight. And you get used to the weight of the box and you can tell by doing that what the condition is inside the box, whether the stores are going down, whether they need, or whether they're sitting quite all right. Supplementary feeding may be required. Late July, all the hives are dosed with a mixture of sugar water and Hive Alive. Hive Alive, is anyone here not know Hive Alive or not used Hive Alive? Hive Alive is like a vitamin tonic for bees, and we mix that in with the sugar, and then we dribble that into the top of the hive. So it gives the the hive a boost, a kick, to start the season. Preparations for pollen contracts start, so we start actually thinking about our pollen contracts and how what we have to do to bring the bees up to the minimum required standard. There is a minimum required standard for pollination contracts, and that is a certain strength within the hive, and that's when we start breeding those bees up. Into August, the days now are starting to get longer and warmer. Egg laying is ramping up and the hives are starting to fly, so they're starting to move again. By the second week in August, bees are located on almond orchards and inspections begin. So once we do the inspection, get them on the orchard, and then we start going through them. Site preparation and clean-up begins, and flora before and after almonds is inspected. Usually the crops are targeted, and canola, the crops are targeted. The canola will bulk up the hives and get them laying strongly. So this is where they start now to actually gather and start to bring in honey and pollen. These are pulled down, and attention to preventing swarming is now in full swing, and the varroa management plan is enacted. September through November, spring now in full swing. So we're in the middle of spring. It's a busy time for beekeepers as the queen is now laying flat out. This results in a large increase in the hive in a short space of time. Full inspections of all hives are conducted, and the hives are assessed for queen cells and the chance of swarming. So now you are actively going through your hives and you're actively checking for queen cells and signs of swarming. So if you were starting to get little play cups, and you've probably all seen the little play cups they make around the frame, that's a sign that they're thinking about doing something. It's imperative that beekeepers are vigilant at this time. We found varroa in our apiary at this inspection this year. So it was at the September inspection when the varroa was detected. So after they'd come out, they're moving around, we started doing the inspection, it was found. It still doesn't negate a feeling of, oh shit. I know that'll be your first reaction. I don't think there's anyone that I know personally that has found varroa in their hives that hasn't had exactly the same reaction as, oh shit. And then the next thing is, what do I do now? So this is where your planning becomes very important, so that you actually have a plan. As you're going forward, you've got some form of plan or skeleton of a plan so that you can start work on it as soon as you need to. Right, what's an ideal site? This is probably an ideal site, but not all you're going to go and sit on a field of canola. So it doesn't matter whether you're in the backyard or you're a commercial operator in the bush or anywhere else. The provisions of the site are the same. Minimum requirements are shade, water, and a little tip. If you've got good neighbours and they've got a swimming pool, come middle of summer, if you haven't given your bees water, you won't have very good neighbours. They won't be happy. I've seen it a few times. The beekeeper who was a firm favourite when you're supplying them with honey is suddenly not so popular anymore. Because the bees will seek out, and swimming pools are a firm favourite with this, they will seek them out. October, we're now in full production. The hives have only one brood box, then an excluder. So these, the bottom box is the brood box. Everything above that is honey. These hives have only one brood box and excluded the rest are honey boxes. The bees are working canola and each box will weigh 20 to 30 kilos. So they're pretty heavy. The blue boards, you can see the blue boards there that ring around, they're escape boards. So the way that we get the bees out of the top boxes, we come along and put those escape boards in, lift the honey up on top of them. They have a one-way gate in the bottom of the board, so the bees go down but can't come back up. And then we come back 1 day, 2 days later and just peel them off and take them away. These bees are working canola. They exit down through the bottom boxes and can't return. The boxes are manually lifted onto pallets for transport back to the base for extraction. So we lift the boxes off manually, and then they're stacked on pallets. But by the end of the day, you've probably had enough. Preparations for apiary expansion or replacement of hives lost over winter begins, and nukes are pulled from the strongest hives. November, the season is now in full swing. So at this point, we're now doing our honey runs, so we're off chasing the honey flows around, and we'll move as the honey flow finishes. The recce's have already been done, and the next place we're going to has been pinpointed. The days are warm and long, so the bees forage further and harder. The queen's now laying at a maximum and will have at least 5 to 6 frames of brood. The beekeepers are now on the road following the honey flows, and the extraction plant back at base is in full swing. Hive inspections, requeening and intense apiary management of the hives to keep them at maximum production capacity occurs. Nukes continue to be set up and queen rearing is in full swing. So 2 ways you can do your queens. You can either buy queens or you can make up nukes and with a cell, so you can get cells, put cells into them, the queen hatches, and then she's caught and takes off. We do both ways. Initially, it's hard early in the season to get queens. You can't get queens usually very early in the season, but you do get cells. So what we do is get the cells and we breed the queens and then pull them out. Then later on in the season, we start getting queens. Nukes continue to be set up and queen rearing is in full swing. The bees are all now located on field sites all over Victoria or bottom of New South Wales, depending on where the blossom and nectar can be found. So that's it. We've probably got a bit soft in the last couple of years, and we don't camp out as much. We tend to use motels a bit more, but previously that's the way we used to spend the season. So you just follow them around and you camp out, come home on the weekend and then head back out through the week. As I said, each one of those boxes are 20 to 30 kilos. There's about 130 to 150 boxes per load. So as you can imagine, lifting that 6th box off the top takes a bit of effort sometimes. Loading at night, an interesting factor here is that we use red light on all our equipment, and also our torches are red light. The bees don't see red light, it's not part of their spectrum, so it avoids us getting stung, and it also doesn't agitate the bees. The bees don't come bubbling out when you go to pick them up, stuff like that. So if you're doing something with your bees and you're doing it at night, or if you've got to move your bees, then use a red filter on your torch, or if you're lucky enough to have an Avant or forklift, put a red filter over the lights. The bees are shifted at night with open doorways to allow ventilation, so we don't shut the bees in at night on your shift. You're all loaded with open doorways. we shift, and then we'll either unload before first light, or we'll unload as soon as we get to that site that night, depending on how far it is. If it's a long run, say from bottom end of New South Wales back into Victoria, something like that, we'll probably shift, have a sleep, get up before first light, unload, and then come. The beekeeper arrives at the site late in the afternoon and inspects the load and then straps them up in preparation for loading. The bottom row of pallets are referred to as the evens. They are all flat and form a base for the upper pallets to be loaded on top. So if we come to the load and we've got some there might be three hives on a pallet that are doubles, and then you'll get a triple. We'll take the top box off that triple and put it on somewhere else that needs another double made up, so that we even our loads out. As I said, we use red light on all our torches in advance because the bees can't register the red light, and they stay calmer and less stressed. And on a good night, with a bit of smoke and in the right area, we're probably pretty lucky we don't get stung at all. So we're pretty happy when that happens. By December, it's now pretty much the same as the previous month. So we're still in our honey run. Now full on, and there's no downtime for beekeepers. Bottom photo was my father Frank Kelly with a massive swarm that he got in the 60s. It took 3 boxes to fit. He was a bit of a character. He didn't wear a veil, and he used to smoke, and he used those, it was log cabin, was the tobacco, the rollies. He used to use log cabin tobacco rollies hanging out his mouth, and that was his smoker. He used to suck on it and puff, and that's exactly what he's doing there. Sucks on it and puffs it into the bees. There you go. So, all recce's have started now for new sources of flowers, and there's still some chance of swarms, even in December, so we're still doing our swarm control. Into January, and at our peak season, we unload the hives and try and place them east or northeast to get the first sun to encourage early foraging. So the idea is to get the warmth of the sun on them as early as possible to get them out and gathering. If you're working in northern country, shade in the afternoon is important so the hive does not become too stressed. And that it's just as important for you if you've got 2 or 3 hives in your backyard. The location in summer is critical so that the bees are not left in the sun and become stressed. February, the apiary is now at its highest production. With winter coming, in the next couple of months, attention turns to recce's to find nectar that will sustain the bees over winter and keep them in good condition. Historically, this has been in higher altitudes, around the snow lines, so recce's continue in these areas. Manna gum, mountain ash and longleaf are all very good for overwintering bees. So we're now heading back up into the cooler areas in the mountains. You can see there the effect of the red light in the smoke, with the smoke, and that's just before we're ready to leave. We go along and smoke them like that, and that puts all the bees back in the hive before we move. Into March, obviously now the days are starting to cool down, they're getting shorter, and the plan now turns to overwintering for bees. Traditionally, the desert area makes an excellent area to overwinter because it's drier. You still get quite a bit of forage overwinter, skeleton weed and other weed in the desert, so that they still get a pick through winter. So they still gather some honey when they can through winter. The planning and identification of hives that need attention to go through winter now starts. So we identify the hives and we start going through and fixing up the hives for winter. Queens, and we talked a little bit about queens before. A combination of cells and queens are used. The hive environment depends on the queen itself, so we probably requeen far more often than what you will requeen every couple of years. So some of your queens might last 4 years before you requeen. Egg laying pattern and behaviour of the bees can be both related to the health of the queen. The queen must move nimbly over all the frames. So when you look for the queen, look for the way she moves across the frames. If she's just dragging her tail along and not very lively, it's probably time to think about a new queen. And date your queens so you can track their age. So when you requeen, on the lid, right when you requeen, so you can track the age. April, winter prep commences. The drones are now being forced out. So for all us blokes, think yourself lucky you're not a bee. Because at about this time of the year, you'd be getting kicked out of the house. Hives are condensed to single, preferably, or if they're too big for singles, to doubles. So that's A, to conserve food stores, and B, so that it makes it much easier for the cluster. They don't have to work as hard to keep warm. Feeding of wheat bees and pollen feed is done, and only above 14 degrees. Then we get to May, time to take a breath, refurb and tidy up. So this is where we do our plant maintenance. We clean everything up, and all the hives have been moved back up into their winter lodging. So just something of interest, just want to touch on quickly, but bees have another role as well, and that is in a therapeutic role. So you've seen companion dogs and all that sort of stuff. Bees can have the same influence. So there's a program called Hives for Heroes. It started in America, it's here in Australia now. Hives for Heroes is for first responders and military personnel predominantly, and what they're using is bees in a therapy role, so that they are actually taking these guys and girls and training them to be beekeepers, and having them work with bees or have a beehive of their own, and it's therapeutically, PTSD, a whole raft of those other conditions has been found to improve when they've been exposed to beekeeping. So something a little bit different. And another one that you might have heard about, Sweet Justice, it was originally at Malmesbury at the Youth Training Centre. They started using bees as a medium at the Youth Training Centre. Claire Parker started it, and it proved to be very successful in introducing trouble kids to bees, and it made a huge difference in the outcome of their treatment plans. So that's two other areas of bees that you wouldn't normally think about where bees are involved. All right. That's the presentation itself.